The October rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the Ferrante estate's gravel driveway into a treacherous river of mud and stone. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the storm lash against the glass, my hands submerged in soapy water as I scrubbed the remnants of the family's dinner from bone china plates that cost more than I made in a month. The water in the sink had gone lukewarm, and small bubbles clung to my wrists like tiny pearls, iridescent under the harsh fluorescent lights. 6 years. That's how long I'd been invisible in this house. 6 years of making beds with hospital corners so precise you could bounce a coin off them, polishing silver until I could see my reflection in every fork and spoon, and pretending not to hear the conversations that happened in rooms I was cleaning. 6 years of watching Salvatore Ferrante conduct his business in the mahogany-paneled study while I dusted bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes he probably never read, his voice low and dangerous as he discussed shipments and territories and people who needed to understand their place in the world. 6 years of knowing exactly what kind of man employed me and choosing silence over safety. I had arrived at the Ferrante estate in the spring of my 23rd year, desperate for work after my father's fishing boat went down in a storm off the Amalfi coast. The insurance money barely covered the funeral, and my mother's hands were too twisted with arthritis to continue her seamstress work. The Ferrante family paid well, better than well, and they didn't ask questions about the backgrounds of their household staff. That alone should have told me something. The first week, I'd been terrified of making a mistake, of breaking something priceless, or interrupting something I shouldn't see. Liliana Costa, the head housekeeper, had taken me aside on my 3rd day and given me advice I'd never forgotten. "Keep your eyes down, your mouth shut, and your hands busy," she'd said in her gravelly voice, weathered from 2 decades in service to the Ferrante family. "What you see here, what you hear, it stays here. Understand?" I'd understood, and I'd been very, very good at following those rules. But understanding the rules and understanding the reality had been 2 different things. It took me 3 months to realize that the shipping business Salvatore ran wasn't just about legitimate cargo containers. It took me 6 months to recognize the patterns, the late-night meetings, the men who arrived in expensive cars and left looking either satisfied or terrified, the occasional appearance of someone with bruised knuckles or a barely concealed bandage. It took me 8 months to clean the study one morning and notice the faint copper smell that no amount of lemon polish could quite mask, and to see the tiny dark spots on the underside of the desk that looked like spattered paint but weren't. I should have left then. Should have packed my single suitcase and disappeared into the night. Found work somewhere else. Anywhere else. But the money I sent home each month kept my mother in her little apartment with heat and food and medicine for her hands. And there was something else. Something I barely admitted to myself, even in the privacy of my own thoughts. I was good at this job. Good at being invisible. At anticipating needs before they were spoken. At maintaining the machine-like efficiency that kept the household running smoothly. In a strange way, I had power here. Not the kind that came from money or violence, but the quiet power of someone who knew where everything was, who understood the rhythms of the house, who could make problems disappear before they became visible. And Salvatore had never once acknowledged my existence beyond the most basic courtesies. "Thank you, Benedetta," when I brought his morning espresso. A nod when I refreshed the flowers in his study. He looked through me the way wealthy men look through servants. We were furniture that happened to move. That should have been a comfort. Instead, on nights when I lay in my small room in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling and listening to the old house settle around me, I sometimes wondered what it would be like to be seen by those dark, intelligent eyes. Really seen, not as the maid or the invisible woman who knew too much, but as myself. It was a dangerous thought, and I always pushed it away. "Benedetta, the linens in the master suite need changing before Signor Ferrante retires." Liliana's voice cut through my reverie, sharp and efficient. The head housekeeper had appeared in the doorway like a ghost, her steel-gray hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. She was 63, thin as a rail, and ran the household with the precision of a general commanding troops. "Of course, Signora Liliana. I'll go up now." I dried my hands on the dish towel, smoothing down my black uniform dress and checking that my hair was still neatly pinned. Even after 6 years, I maintained the standards she'd drilled into me from day one. I climbed the servants' staircase to the second floor, my footsteps silent on the carpeted steps. The mansion sprawled across the hilltop like a sleeping beast, 3 floors, 18 bedrooms, and enough history to fill a library. The Ferrante family had owned this land for 4 generations, building their fortune first through olive oil and wine, then through ventures that became progressively less documented in official records. The master suite occupied the entire east wing of the second floor. I unlocked the door with my passkey and stepped into the familiar space. All dark wood and darker secrets. The room smelled of sandalwood and expensive cologne, with undertones of the leather-bound books that lined one wall. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the center, its posts carved with intricate designs that probably had some family significance I would never know. I moved through the familiar routine, stripping the bed with efficient movements, my hands working automatically while my mind wandered. The sheets were Italian cotton with a thread count I couldn't begin to guess, soft as water, and probably worth more than my entire wardrobe. I replaced them with fresh linens from the warming cupboard, making hospital corners that would have made my mother proud, fluffing pillows that felt like clouds. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the storm continuing its assault on the landscape. The Ferrante estate perched on a hilltop overlooking a lake that stretched toward the mountains in the distance. On clear days, the view was breathtaking. Tonight, it was ominous. The water churning black and angry, the sky pressing down like a bruise, the wind bending the cypress trees until they looked like they might snap. I was smoothing the duvet, running my hands over the fabric to eliminate any wrinkle, when I heard the shouting from downstairs. My hands stilled. 6 years had taught me to recognize the different tones of conflict in this house. Business disagreements were conducted in controlled voices behind closed doors, all measured words and veiled threats. Family arguments were loud but brief, usually between Salvatore and Adriano, about matters I didn't fully understand. This was something else entirely. Panic, urgency, the kind of fear that made voices crack and rise. I moved to the door, opening it just enough to hear clearly. The sounds were coming from the main foyer, echoing up through the grand staircase. Can't reach him on the phone. Has anyone tried the radio in the car? Said he was going to the north property to meet with Esposito about the contracts. In this storm, on those roads, he should have been back an hour ago. Adriano Ferrante's voice, Salvatore's younger brother, rose above the others with the kind of command that came naturally to men in this family. Send men to search, now. Split up. Half take the main road, half take the north route. Check the cliff road first. My stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. The cliff road. I knew it well. Had ridden in the car with Liliana once when we went to pick up special supplies from the village. The narrow path hugged the mountainside, barely wide enough for one vehicle, with nothing but a flimsy metal guardrail between the asphalt and a 100-foot drop to the lake below. On sunny days it was treacherous. In weather like this, it was suicide. I should have returned to my duties. Should have finished the linens, straightened the bathroom towels, checked that the fresh flowers in the vase hadn't wilted, gone back to the kitchen, minded my business as I had for 6 years. That was the safest path, the smart path, the path that had kept me employed and alive in a house where asking questions or showing too much initiative could be dangerous. But my feet carried me down the hall, past the guest rooms and the gallery of family portraits, down the grand staircase with its polished banister and runner carpet that muffled my steps. I could see the group gathered in the foyer, Adriano in the center, his dark hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it, surrounded by at least 8 men in dark suits. Some I recognized as drivers and security. Others had the hard look of men whose job descriptions didn't appear on any official payroll. Signor Adriano. My voice came out quieter than I'd intended, but somehow it cut through the chaos. Every head turned toward me, and I fought the instinct to step back under the weight of their collective attention. Adriano's eyes focused on me, dark like his brother's, but where Salvatore's gaze was often cold and calculating, Adriano's held a warmth that had always made me slightly less afraid of him. Benedetta. What is it? I descended the last few steps, my hands clasped in front of me to hide their trembling. The cliff road, signore. After 3 days of rain, the shoulder will be soft. The drainage there has never been good. I've heard Liliana complain about it for years. If a car went off. I couldn't finish the sentence, but I didn't need to. His expression shifted, understanding dawning with a terrible clarity. The lake. Christ. If the car went into the water, searching the road won't help. Someone needs to check the shoreline, and quickly. One of the men, Dimitri, I thought, one of the senior security staff, stepped forward. I can take the boat, but in this storm, in the dark. I'll go with him. The words were out of my mouth before I could think them through, before I could calculate the risks or consider the implications. I know this property better than anyone except Liliana. I know where the currents are strongest, where debris collects. If the car went in, I can help find it. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the rain hammering against the windows like fists demanding entry. I could feel every eye on me, could sense the surprise in their gazes. The invisible maid, volunteering to search for the boss in a storm that was getting worse by the minute. Adriano studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I held his gaze. I could see him calculating, weighing options, considering possibilities. Then he nodded once, sharply. Go. Dimitri, take her. The rest of you, search every inch of road between here and the north property. Radio in every 10 minutes. Move. The men dispersed with military efficiency, and I was already moving toward the coat closet near the service entrance. My practical mind cataloged what I would need. The heavy waterproof jacket that hung there. Too large for me, but better than nothing. Boots from the mudroom, thick-soled and sturdy. A flashlight from the emergency kit that Liliana kept meticulously stocked. But underneath the calm efficiency, my heart was racing, and my hands shook as I pulled on the jacket. Why was I doing this? What insanity had possessed me to volunteer for this search? Salvatore Ferrante was a man who had ordered deaths as casually as he ordered his morning espresso. I had cleaned the study the morning after 3 men were killed in the East Warehouse. Liliana had mentioned it in passing, her voice matter of fact, as if violence was just another stain to be removed. I had served dinner to visiting associates whose faces appeared on the news a week later with the word missing underneath. I had pressed shirts that smelled faintly of gunpowder and polished shoes that might have walked through blood. I knew what he was. Knew it in my bones, in the careful way I'd learned to move through this house, in the nightmares that sometimes woke me at 3 a.m. And yet, when I imagined Salvatore Ferrante trapped in a car filling with water, struggling for breath as the lake claimed him, something in my chest constricted painfully. He was a monster, yes, but he was also the man who left generous bonuses for the staff every Christmas, who had quietly paid for the gardener's daughter's surgery when she needed a kidney transplant, who sometimes stood at his study window late at night staring out at the darkness with an expression of such profound loneliness that it made my throat tighten. I didn't love him. How could I? I barely knew him beyond his habits and routines, but in 6 years of invisible observation, I had seen glimpses of complexity that complicated the simple narrative of crime lord or monster. And maybe that was enough to make me pull on these boots and follow Dimitri out into the storm. The rain hit me like a wall of water the moment we stepped outside. Within seconds, I was soaked through, the jacket doing little to keep out the cold. Dmitri led the way down the stone path toward the boathouse, a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead of us. The boathouse sat at the edge of the property, where the manicured lawn gave way to rocky shoreline. The boat itself was a sleek speedboat, probably worth more than I would make in 5 years, designed for leisure cruises across the lake on sunny afternoons. Tonight, it would be our search vessel. Dmitri got the engine running while I climbed aboard, clutching the railing as the boat rocked in the choppy water. He handed me a second flashlight, and I clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the angry surface of the lake. "Which way?" he shouted over the combined roar of engine and storm. "North," I called back, pointing toward the cliff road. "Follow the shoreline. If he went off near the village turn, the current would carry the car toward the rocks near the old pine grove." The boat cut through the churning water, spray soaking us both as Dmitri handled the engine with expert precision. I swept the flashlight beam methodically across the shoreline, right to left, near to far, looking for anything out of place. The rain was relentless, soaking through my jacket, plastering my dark hair to my face and neck. My fingers ached from gripping the flashlight so tightly, but I didn't let up. We'd been searching for 20 minutes when I saw it. Fresh gouges in the earth at the cliff's edge, the soil dark and wet and torn. The guardrail was bent and twisted, hanging at an unnatural angle like a broken bone. "There!" I pointed, and Dmitri immediately steered us closer, the boat's spotlight illuminating the scene. The car was half submerged in the shallows, nose down in the rocky lake bottom, the back end jutting out at an angle that made my stomach turn. Even from a distance, I could see the spiderweb cracks in the windshield, the way the driver's side door hung partially open like a broken jaw. Water was pouring into the interior, and I knew with the certainty of someone who had grown up near the sea, that time was running out. Dmitri was already on his radio, calling for backup, his voice urgent but controlled. But I was moving before conscious thought could stop me, shrugging out of the heavy jacket because I knew it would only drag me down, kicking off the boots that would fill with water and pull me under. "Benedetta, wait." Dimitri's voice was lost in the storm as I dove. The cold was a physical blow, stealing my breath, making my muscles seize and my lungs scream for air. For a terrifying moment, I thought I had made a fatal mistake, that I would drown before I even reached the car. But then training from childhood swam to the surface. My father teaching me to swim in the Mediterranean, teaching me to respect the water but not fear it. And I forced my limbs to move. I swam toward the wreck, my dress becoming a leaden weight around my legs, fighting the current that tried to drag me toward deeper water. My hands found the car's doorframe, and I hauled myself closer, peering into the dark interior. Salvatore was still in the driver's seat, slumped forward against the deflated airbag, blood streaking down his face from a cut above his eye. The water was rising steadily, already up to his chest. In minutes, maybe less, it would be over his head, and if he was unconscious, he would drown. "Signor Ferrante!" I shouted over the storm, reaching through the open door to shake his shoulder. The fabric of his expensive suit was soaked, and beneath my hand, I could feel the solid muscle of a man who was no stranger to physical confrontation. "Salvatore!" I don't know why I used his first name. In 6 years, I had never once addressed him so informally. It would have been unthinkable, a breach of protocol that could have gotten me fired or worse. But something about the moment, the water, the storm, the very real possibility of death, stripped away the careful boundaries I'd maintained for so long. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with pain. They were dark brown, I noticed with strange clarity, almost black in the dim light, with small flecks of gold that I'd never been close enough to see before. He tried to speak, his lips forming words, but only a groan emerged from his throat. The seatbelt. I could see it stretched across his chest, holding him in place, but the mechanism was crushed from the impact. I fumbled for the small knife I always kept in my dress pocket, the one I used for opening packages in the kitchen, for cutting twine and trimming flowers. and began sawing through the thick webbing with desperate urgency. The water was up to his neck now, lapping at his chin. My hands were shaking so badly from cold and fear that I could barely grip the knife, but I kept cutting, kept praying to saints I'd stopped believing in years ago, kept refusing to accept that I might be too late. The belt snapped with a sound I felt more than heard. Salvatore's weight shifted forward, and I grabbed him under the arms, trying to pull him from the wreckage. He was easily 200 pounds of solid muscle, and dead weight made him even heavier. The current tugged at us both, trying to pull us away from the car, toward the deep water where we would both sink. For a terrifying moment, I thought this was it, that we would both go under, that my attempt to save him would only mean we died together instead of separately. My arms screamed with the effort. My lungs burned. My vision started to blur at the edges. But then there were other hands, strong hands, helping me drag Salvatore from the car. Dimitri had anchored the boat and come in after us, and together we struggled toward the vessel. Other men had arrived. I could hear shouts echoing across the water, see flashlight beams cutting through the rain like searchlights. But all that mattered was getting Salvatore out of the water, getting him to shore, getting him to breathe. We hauled him onto the boat with strength I didn't know I possessed. I immediately rolled him onto his side, just as my father had taught me when teaching water safety, and pressed on his back. Water poured from his mouth as his body convulsed, coughing and retching. His chest heaved with the effort of breathing, each breath a gasping wheeze that sounded painful but alive. Alive. His eyes opened again, clearer this time, focusing on something instead of staring blankly. They found mine in the darkness and rain, and for the first time in 6 years, Salvatore Ferrante really looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. His gaze traveled across my face, my soaked hair hanging in dark ropes around my shoulders, my dress clinging to my frame, my lips probably blue from cold. And something shifted in his expression. His lips moved, forming words I had to lean close to hear over the storm and the shouts of the arriving men. "You came," he rasped, his voice barely audible, raw from lake water and trauma. "You came for me. Why?" It was a simple question, but the weight behind it was enormous. Why had I come? Why had I volunteered to search? Why had I risked my life for a man I barely knew? A man who probably couldn't even remember my full name most days. A man whose hands were stained with blood I couldn't see but knew was there. I should have said something about duty, about loyalty to the family that employed me, about simply doing what needed to be done. Instead, the truth fell from my lips before I could stop it, raw and honest in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be in 6 years. I couldn't let you die. Something profound shifted in his dark eyes. Surprise? Certainly. But also recognition, as if I'd confirmed something he'd suspected or revealed something he'd been waiting to see. His hand, cold and trembling from shock and exposure, reached up slowly to touch my face. His fingers traced the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made absolutely no sense, that contradicted everything I knew about him, everything I'd observed, everything I'd convinced myself was true. Then his eyes fluttered closed again, and panic seized me like a fist around my heart. "No, stay awake. Salvatore, stay with me. You have to stay conscious." Dimitri was already steering us toward shore, where an ambulance waited, its lights flashing red and white against the storm-dark sky like a beacon. Men rushed forward as we docked, medical professionals with equipment and efficiency, lifting Salvatore onto a stretcher with practiced precision. They surrounded him immediately, checking vitals, starting IVs, barking medical terminology I didn't understand. I stood on the boat, soaked and shivering so hard my teeth chattered, watching as they carried him away toward the ambulance. My legs felt like water, my arms ached, and I couldn't seem to catch my breath properly. Adriano appeared at my side, materializing out of the chaos like a ghost. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, the scratchy wool of an emergency blanket, the kind kept in first aid kits, and guided me off the boat. "You saved his life," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise and confusion. His hand on my shoulder was gentle but firm, grounding. "Benedetta, you saved my brother's life. He won't forget that. Neither will I." I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat, unable to process what had just happened. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving me hollow and shaking, my mind struggling to catch up with my body, because I knew what saving Salvatore Ferrante's life meant. I had crossed a line tonight, stepped out of the shadows where I'd hidden for 6 years, moved from invisible servant to someone who mattered, someone who had agency, someone he had seen, really seen, perhaps for the first time. And in the Ferrante family, in this world of unspoken rules and dangerous loyalties, being seen could be either a blessing or a curse. I just didn't know yet which one it would be. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and weak coffee. I sat in a plastic chair that was designed to be uncomfortable, still wrapped in the emergency blanket, my wet dress clinging to my skin beneath it. Someone had brought me dry socks and a pair of hospital scrubs, but I hadn't had the energy to change yet. I simply sat, staring at the fluorescent lights overhead, trying to process everything that had happened. Adriano paced in front of the windows, his phone pressed to his ear as he conducted a series of terse conversations in rapid Italian. Every few minutes, another man in a dark suit would arrive, approach him with lowered voice, receive instructions, and disappear again. The Ferrante machine was in motion, and I was watching it operate from the inside for the first time. Liliana had arrived 20 minutes ago, her severe face creased with worry, carrying a bag with dry clothes for me. She sat beside me now, her thin hand resting on my arm in a gesture of comfort that surprised me with its gentleness. "You should change, child," she said softly, her accent thicker than usual with emotion. "You'll catch your death sitting in wet clothes." "Is there any news?" My voice came out hoarse, and I realized I'd been silent for over an hour. She shook her head. "They're still working on him. The doctors say the next few hours are critical. He took in a lot of water, and there's the head injury to consider. But he's strong, our Salvatore. He'll fight." Our Salvatore. The possessiveness in her tone spoke to decades of service, of loyalty that ran deeper than employment. I wondered if I would ever feel that sense of belonging, or if I would always be the outsider who happened to work here. "Liliana," I began hesitantly, "why did he go out in the storm, alone, on that road?" Her expression hardened, the momentary softness disappearing behind her professional mask. "That's not for us to question, Benedetta. You know that. But I had saved his life. Didn't that earn me the right to ask questions?" Still, old habits were strong, and I nodded in acceptance. The door to the waiting room opened, and a doctor in pale blue scrubs emerged. Adriano was at his side instantly, and I found myself standing without conscious decision, the blanket falling from my shoulders. "He's stable," the doctor said, and I felt my knees weaken with relief. "The hypothermia was our immediate concern, but we've warmed him gradually. The head injury required stitches but no surgery. His lungs are clear, surprisingly so, given how long he was in the water. He's lucky to be alive." "Can I see him?" Adriano asked. "He's asking for someone." The doctor consulted his clipboard. "Benedetta? Is there a Benedetta here?" Every head in the room turned toward me. I felt the weight of their stares. Surprise, curiosity, and in some cases, suspicion. Why would Salvatore Ferrante ask for the maid before his own brother? "I'm Benedetta," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The doctor nodded. "He's been quite insistent. Room 412, 5 minutes only. He needs rest." Adriano's hand closed around my wrist as I moved to follow the doctor. His grip wasn't painful, but it was unmistakably a restraint. Benedetta, my brother is in a vulnerable state. Whatever he says to you. I know how to be discreet, Signor Adriano, I said quietly. 6 years in your household has taught me that much. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, and he released me. Of course. Go. The walk to room 412 felt endless. My heart hammered against my ribs with each step, and I couldn't quite identify the emotion churning in my chest. Fear? Anticipation? Something else I didn't want to name? I knocked softly before entering. The room was dimly lit, machines beeping softly in the background, monitoring vitals with mechanical precision. Salvatore lay in the hospital bed, his dark hair damp and pushed back from his forehead, a white bandage stark against his olive skin. An IV ran to his left arm, and oxygen tubes fed into his nose. His eyes were closed, but they opened when I approached, focusing on me with an intensity that made me want to step back. Benedetta, my name in his voice sounded different than I'd ever heard it. Not the absent acknowledgement of a servant, but something weighted with meaning. Signor Ferrante, I'm glad you're all right. I stood at a respectful distance from the bed, my hands clasped in front of me in the posture Liliana had drilled into me years ago. Come closer. It wasn't a request. I moved to the bedside, acutely aware of how I must look. My hair dried in tangled waves around my face, wearing borrowed hospital scrubs, no makeup, stripped of the professional armor of my uniform. He studied me in silence for a long moment, his gaze traveling across my features with an attention that made my skin warm. You pulled me from the car. Dimitri helped, and the others. You jumped into the lake in the middle of a storm, he interrupted, his voice rough but clear. You cut my seatbelt with a kitchen knife. You dragged 200 pounds of dead weight through the water. He paused. Why? It was the second time he'd asked me that question. I told you I couldn't let you die. That's not an answer. That's a statement of action. His hand moved on the bed, fingers flexing as if testing their functionality. I want to know why. Men who work for me, men who owe me their livelihoods, their protection, their very lives, would have hesitated before diving into that lake. But you didn't hesitate. Why? I struggled to find words that were honest, but safe, because it was the right thing to do. Because you're a human being who needed help. Because I stopped, unable to finish the thought. Because? He pressed, relentless even from a hospital bed. Because in 6 years I've cleaned your study and made your bed and pressed your shirts, and I've watched you late at night when you think no one can see you. The words spilled out before I could stop them. I've seen you stare out windows with an expression that breaks my heart. I've watched you be generous to people who can't repay you. I've seen you carry burdens that would crush other men. And I thought... I swallowed hard. I thought the world would be darker without you in it, whatever else you might be. The silence that followed was deafening. I had said too much, revealed too much. 6 years of careful invisibility, shattered in a moment of honesty. You see me, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. All this time, I thought you were just another servant who knew enough to keep her mouth shut, but you actually see me. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. His hand shot out faster than I expected, catching my wrist in a grip that was gentle but unmistakably possessive. 6 years, Benedetta. 6 years you've been in my house, and I never really looked at you. I saw a woman who was good at her job, who was quiet and efficient and utterly trustworthy. But I didn't see you. His thumb stroked the inside of my wrist, finding my pulse point, feeling the rapid beat of my heart. I see you now, and I need to know something. How much do you know? About what I do? About who I am? This was the dangerous question. the one that could get me killed if I answered honestly. But after saving his life, after his hand on my wrist, and his eyes looking at me like I was the only person in the world, I found I couldn't lie. I know you run more than shipping companies. I know the men who visit you aren't all legitimate business partners. I know that sometimes people who cross you disappear, and that the police don't ask questions they don't want answered. I met his gaze steadily. I know you're powerful and dangerous, and probably responsible for things that would horrify me if I knew the details. And yet you saved my life anyway. Yes. Why? For the third time, the same question, but this time it sounded different. Vulnerable, almost desperate. Because knowing what someone does and knowing who they are aren't the same thing, I said softly. And because I've spent 6 years seeing who you are when you think no one's watching, that man deserved to be saved. Something broke in his expression, the careful control slipping to reveal raw emotion underneath. His grip on my wrist tightened. Benedetta, I need you to understand something. What you did tonight, saving my life when you knew exactly what kind of man I am, that changes everything. You can't go back to being invisible. You can't go back to just being the maid who knows too much. What are you saying? I'm saying that loyalty like yours is rarer than diamonds and more valuable than gold. I'm saying that I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. Power, money, protection, access. But you asked for nothing. You've been content to remain in the shadows, to do your job and cash your paychecks and keep your secrets. He paused, his eyes intense. Why? What do you want, Benedetta? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? To take care of my mother. To have enough money that I don't wake up afraid every month. I hesitated, but his grip on my wrist encouraged honesty. To matter. To be more than invisible. You matter, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Christo, you matter more than you know, and you're about to find out exactly how much. Before I could respond, the door opened. A nurse entered, professional and apologetic. I'm sorry, but visiting hours are over. Mr. Ferrante needs his rest. Salvatore released my wrist slowly, reluctantly. Tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. We have much to discuss. I nodded, backing toward the door. His eyes followed me until I disappeared into the hallway. Adriano was waiting outside, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable as he studied me. What did my brother say to you? That he's grateful I saved his life, I replied carefully. And what else? I met his gaze. That's between Salvatore and me, Signor Adriano. With respect. A slow smile spread across his face. You have courage, Benedetta. I've always known you were smart. You'd have to be to survive 6 years knowing what you know. But courage is different. Rarer. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. He pushed off from the wall. My brother is going to change your life. Whether that's for better or worse depends on how you handle what comes next. The world you've observed from the shadows, you're about to step into it fully. That means protection, but it also means danger. People will want to use you to get to him. Others will see you as a threat. Are you prepared for that? Honestly, I had no idea. 24 hours ago, I'd been invisible. Now I was standing in a hospital hallway being warned about dangers I couldn't fully comprehend by a man who probably had blood on his hands. I don't know, I admitted. But I don't think I have a choice anymore, do I? You always have a choice, Benedetta. That's what makes what happens next interesting. He gestured toward the exit. Come. Liliana is waiting to take you home. Get some rest. Tomorrow, everything changes. The drive back to the estate was quiet. I sat in the back of the car while Dimitri drove. Liliana beside me, her hand occasionally patting mine in wordless comfort. The storm had finally broken, leaving the world washed clean and eerily silent. When we arrived, Liliana walked me to my room in the servants' quarters. She paused at the door, her weathered hand on my shoulder. "Benedetta, I've worked for the Ferrante family for 20 years. I've seen women come and go from Salvatore's life. Beautiful women, sophisticated women, women who understood the world he moves in. But I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight in that ambulance, when they were loading him in and you stood there soaked and shivering." My heart skipped. How did he look at me? Like a man who's found something he didn't know he was looking for. Her expression grew serious. "Be careful, child. Salvatore's world is not kind to the people he cares about. His enemies will see you as a weakness to exploit. And in his business, weaknesses get people killed." After she left, I stood in my small room, still wearing the hospital scrubs, and looked around at my life. The narrow bed with its simple white coverlet. The chest of drawers that held all my possessions. The small window that looked out over the garden. For 6 years, this had been enough. This room, this job, this invisible existence. But Salvatore was right. I couldn't go back to invisible. Not after tonight. I pulled out my phone and called my mother, hearing her familiar voice answer with concern. It was late, and I never called this late. "Mama, I'm fine. I just wanted to hear your voice." We talked for 20 minutes, about nothing and everything. She told me about her neighbor's grandson who had started university. I told her about the storm, leaving out the parts about nearly drowning and saving a mafia boss's life. Just before we hung up, she said something that made my throat tight. "You sound different, Tesoro. Like something has changed." "Maybe it has, Mama. Maybe it has." That night, I dreamed of dark water and darker eyes, of hands reaching for me in the storm, of a voice saying my name like a prayer. I woke before dawn, as I always did, but I didn't go down to start my morning duties. Instead, I stood at my window, watching the sun rise over the lake, painting the water gold and pink, beautiful and deceptive in its calm. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "A car will pick you up at 10 a.m. You're not working today. You're visiting me at the hospital. And then we're going to have a very long conversation about your future. S." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the delete button. I could ignore it, could pack my bags, withdraw my savings, and disappear before anyone realized I was gone. Could go back to being invisible in some other city, some other house. But even as the thought formed, I knew I wouldn't do it. Because for the first time in 6 years, someone saw me. Really saw me. And whatever danger that brought, whatever complications it created, I found I wanted to be seen more than I wanted to be safe. I texted back a single word. Okay. The die was cast. My invisible life was over. And something new, dangerous, and terrifying was about to begin. The black Mercedes arrived at precisely 10 o'clock. Dimitri stood beside it, holding the door open with the same professional courtesy he'd shown me during the rescue. But something had shifted in the way he looked at me. There was respect there now. Acknowledgement that I was no longer just household staff. I had dressed carefully that morning, pulling from the limited wardrobe in my small closet. A simple navy dress that Liliana had given me last year, modest but well-fitted. I'd braided my hair and applied minimal makeup, trying to find a balance between my servant self and whatever I was becoming. The hospital room was different in daylight. Salvatore sat propped up against pillows, his color better than the night before, though the bandage on his head remained stark white against his dark hair. He was reading something on a tablet, and he looked up when I entered, setting it aside immediately. "Benedetta, thank you for coming." He gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Sit, please." I sat, folding my hands in my lap, suddenly nervous under his direct attention. In the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital, I could see details I'd never noticed before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the silver threading through his hair at his temples, the lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Like I drove off a cliff and nearly drowned," he said wryly. "But alive, thanks to you. The doctors say I can go home tomorrow if there are no complications." "That's good news." "Benedetta." He said my name with a weight that made me look up, meeting his dark eyes. "We need to talk about what happens next. But before we do, I need to know something. Last night, you said you knew what I was, what I do. I need you to be more specific. What exactly do you know?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "I know that your shipping business is a front for moving other things. I've heard enough conversations to piece that together, though I don't know specifics. I know you have arrangements with city officials that aren't exactly legal. I know that men who cross you tend to have accidents, or disappear, or suddenly decide to relocate." I met his gaze. "I know you're what people call a crime boss, though I suspect that's an oversimplification of what you actually do, and this doesn't frighten you?" "It terrifies me," I admitted. "But being terrified and being unwilling to accept reality are different things. I've known what you were for years. If I was going to run, I would have done it already." "Why didn't you?" It was a fair question. At first, because I needed the money. My mother's medical bills, the rent. I couldn't afford to be unemployed, but later. I struggled to find the words. Later. Because I realized that you're not a monster pretending to be a man. You're a man who does monstrous things. That distinction matters to me. He absorbed this in silence, his expression unreadable. Then, 2 years ago, you cleaned my study after a particularly difficult meeting. There was blood on the carpet. Not much, just a few drops, but enough. You cleaned it without comment, without hesitation, without ever mentioning it. Why? I remembered that day. Because mentioning it would have put both of us in an awkward position. You would have felt obligated to explain or threaten me. I would have had to pretend ignorance or fear. It was easier to simply clean it and move on. "You've been protecting me," he said slowly, realization dawning. "All these years, you've been protecting me by staying silent, by being discreet, by making problems disappear before they became visible. You've been the perfect employee, not just because you're good at your job, but because you understood the game and chose to play it safely. Is that wrong? No." His hand reached out, finding mine where it rested on my lap. His fingers were warm, strong, and the touch sent electricity up my arm. "It's extraordinary. Do you know how rare that kind of loyalty is? Especially loyalty that asks for nothing in return?" I was paid well. Money isn't loyalty, Benedetta. Money is compensation. Loyalty is what you showed when you jumped into that lake knowing exactly who you were saving. His thumb traced circles on my palm, a gesture that should have felt presumptuous, but instead felt natural, right? "I need to tell you something I've never told anyone outside my immediate family." I waited, my heart hammering. 3 years ago, there was an attempt on my life. A car bomb. I survived because I decided at the last minute to take a different car. My usual vehicle exploded in the estate driveway with my driver inside. Giuseppe. He died instantly. Salvatore's voice was tight with old pain. After that, I became... paranoid isn't quite the right word. Vigilant. I started paying attention to people around me in new ways. Not just looking for enemies, but looking for weaknesses. For people who could be compromised, bought, turned against me. And, I prompted softly, And I realized that the most dangerous person in my household was the quiet maid who knew everything and said nothing. You had information that could destroy me, Benedetta. You knew my schedule, my habits, my vulnerabilities. You had access to my private spaces. If someone wanted to kill me, buying you would have been the smartest play. My stomach dropped. So you tested me. I tested you, he confirmed. Small things at first, leaving sensitive documents visible while you cleaned. Having conversations in rooms where you were working that contained dangerous information. Watching to see if you showed any interest, if you lingered, if you remembered. He paused. You never took the bait, not once. You cleaned around the documents without looking at them. You continued working when we talked, showing no reaction to things that should have shocked or frightened you. I was trying to survive, I said quietly. I thought if I just stayed invisible, if I never gave you a reason to see me as a threat. You weren't invisible, Benedetta. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I saw you. I watched you for 3 years, looking for any sign of betrayal, any indication that you were a threat. And what I found. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. What I found was the most trustworthy person I've ever known. Someone who saw me at my worst and chose discretion over exploitation. Someone who asked for nothing beyond fair compensation for honest work. Someone who treated me like a human being, even when you knew I did inhuman things. Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. I didn't know you were watching. I know. That's what made it real. You weren't performing for my benefit. You were just being who you are. His hand tightened on mine. And then last night, when you jumped into that lake, when you risked your life to save mine knowing exactly what kind of man I am, that wasn't loyalty to an employer, Benedetta. That was something else entirely. What was it? I whispered. I don't know. That's what we need to figure out. He pulled my hand closer, pressing it against his chest where I could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. But I know what I feel. I know that when I opened my eyes in that car and saw you there, cutting through my seatbelt with a kitchen knife, soaking wet and terrified but refusing to give up, I knew that you were the only person in the world I could trust completely, the only person who's ever seen all of me and not run away. Salvatore, I began, but he cut me off. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to stay in my life beyond your employment. But I am asking you to consider a different arrangement. One where you're not invisible, where you're not just the maid, where you're... He paused, searching for the right word. Where you're mine, under my protection, with all that entails. The proposal hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I was only beginning to understand. What does that mean exactly? Under your protection? It means you stop living in the servants' quarters. It means you're compensated appropriately for the risks you take by being associated with me. It means that anyone who wants to hurt me will see you as a target, but also that anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me personally. His voice dropped to something darker, more dangerous. It means that you become part of my inner circle, Benedetta. Not as an employee, but as someone I trust with my life. Because you've already proven I can trust you with exactly that. And in return? In return, you continue doing what you've done for 6 years. You keep my secrets. You stay loyal. You see me as a human being instead of a monster. The only difference is that now I see you too. Really see you. And I protect what's mine. There was that word again. Mine. It should have felt possessive, threatening even. Instead, it felt like a promise. I need time to think, I said, though part of me already knew my answer. It's a lot to process. Take the time you need, but Benedetta, His hand released mine only to cup my face, his palm warm against my cheek. Understand that there's no going back to invisible. Whether you accept my offer or not, you've been seen now. By me, by my family, by people who will have heard about the maid who saved Salvatore Ferrante's life. You can't disappear back into the shadows. A knock at the door interrupted us. Adriano entered, his expression serious. He glanced at our proximity, Salvatore's hand still on my face, my body leaned toward his, and something flickered in his eyes before he schooled his features to neutrality. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Salvatore's hand dropped from my face, but his gaze remained on me for a long moment before he turned to his brother. What kind of problem? The kind that involves Gabriella Romano asking questions about who pulled you from the lake last night. Her people have been making inquiries about our household staff. Adriano's eyes flicked to me apologetically. Specifically about a maid named Benedetta. The name sent a chill through me. Gabriella Romano. I'd heard it whispered in the halls, always with a certain fear. She controlled the Northern Territories, and rumor had it she'd gotten there by being even more ruthless than the men she'd displaced. Why would she care about who saved me? Salvatore's voice had gone cold, dangerous. Because she's wondering why someone would risk their life for you. She's looking for leverage, weaknesses, and a maid who jumps into lakes to save you qualifies as both. Salvatore's jaw tightened. Increase security on the estate. I want a full protection detail on Benedetta, starting now. No one goes near her without clearance. Already done. But Salvatore, we need to consider. I know what we need to consider. Salvatore's eyes found mine, and I saw apology there and determination. Benedetta, I need you to go with Dimitri. He'll take you somewhere safe while we deal with this. Safe where? I asked, fear starting to creep in. A property I own outside the city. Secure, isolated, just for a few days while we assess the threat level. This was happening too fast. I can't just disappear. My mother, she'll worry. We'll contact her, tell her you're on a work trip. She'll be protected too, just as a precaution. He reached for my hand again, his grip urgent. Benedetta, please. Trust me on this. Gabriella Romano doesn't make idle inquiries. If she's interested in you, that makes you a target. And I can't... His voice broke slightly. I can't risk something happening to you because you saved my life. The irony of the situation hit me. I'd saved him, and now that act of courage had put me in danger. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine fear there, not for himself, but for me, I found I couldn't argue. Okay, I whispered. I'll go. Relief flooded his features. Thank you. Dimitri will stay with you. He's one of my most trusted men. He pulled me closer, pressing his forehead to mine in a gesture so intimate it stole my breath. I promise you, Benedetta. This will be resolved quickly. And when it is, when you're safe, we'll continue our conversation about your future. Our future. Dimitri appeared in the doorway, and I recognized the signal. Time to go. I stood, but Salvatore kept hold of my hand until the very last moment, his fingers sliding reluctantly from mine. Stay safe, he said. That's an order from your employer. I managed a small smile. Yes, Signor Ferrante. Salvatore, he corrected softly. When we're alone, it's Salvatore. The name felt dangerous on my tongue, intimate in a way that crossed boundaries I wasn't sure I should be crossing, but I nodded. Salvatore. His smile was brief but genuine, transforming his face from dangerous to breathtaking. Better. The safe house was a villa in the countryside, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, beautiful, and isolating in equal measure. Dimitri showed me to a bedroom that was larger than my entire room at the estate, with windows overlooking rolling hills painted gold by the afternoon sun. There are 3 other men here, Dimitri explained. All Ferrante family security. You're safe, but don't leave the property without an escort. Understood? I nodded, feeling unreal. 24 hours ago, I'd been invisible. Now I was in protective custody because a rival crime boss saw me as a potential weakness in Salvatore Ferrante's armor. Liliana called that evening, her voice tight with worry. Benedetta, are you all right? They told me you had to leave suddenly. I'm fine, Liliana. I'm safe. How could I explain any of this? Things got complicated. Complicated. She laughed bitterly. That's one word for it. Child, do you understand what's happening? Salvatore Ferrante has claimed you. By putting you under his protection, by moving you to a safe house, he's announced to the entire underworld that you matter to him. Do you know what that means? That I'm in danger. That you're in his world now. Really in it. There's no going back to invisible, Benedetta. Even if this threat passes, even if Gabriella Romano loses interest, you're marked now. As his. After we hung up, I stood at the window, watching the sun set over the vineyards, painting everything in shades of amber and crimson. My phone buzzed with a text. Are you settled? S. I typed back, yes, the villa is beautiful. Not as beautiful as the woman who saved my life. Sleep well, Benedetta. Tomorrow we'll talk more. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart doing complicated things in my chest. This man, this dangerous, powerful, complicated man, was seeing me. Really seeing me. And despite the fear, despite the danger, despite everything my rational mind was screaming at me, I found I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be his. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home. 3 days passed in the villa like a strange dream. I woke to sunlight streaming through silk curtains, ate meals prepared by a chef I never saw, and walked the grounds with Dimitri shadowing me at a respectful distance. It was luxury beyond anything I'd ever experienced, but it was still a cage, gilded though it might be. Salvatore called every evening. At first, the conversations were brief. Updates on his recovery, assurances that the situation with Gabriella Romano was being handled. But on the 3rd night, our conversation shifted into something else entirely. Tell me about your childhood, he said, his voice warm through the phone. I realize I know almost nothing about you beyond what's in your employment file. I settled into the plush armchair by the window, tucking my feet beneath me. There's not much to tell. I grew up in a fishing village on the coast. My father owned a boat. My mother was a seamstress. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. My father died when I was 23. Storm took his boat down. After that, my mother's arthritis got worse. She couldn't work anymore, and I needed to find something that paid better than the jobs available in the village. I paused. That's when I found the listing for the Ferrante estate. The salary was generous enough that I could support both of us. And you've been sending money home ever since. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Every month. She has a small apartment in the village, enough for her needs. It's not much, but it's stable. Benedetta. His voice softened. You've spent 6 years working in my house, invisible and afraid, just to take care of your mother. That's not nothing. That's everything. The sincerity in his tone made my throat tight. She's all I have. Not anymore. The words were quiet but absolute. Now you have me, and my protection extends to anyone you care about. Your mother will be looked after, regardless of what you decide about us. Us. I tested the word, finding it strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Is there an us, Salvatore? I think there has been for longer than either of us realized. I just wasn't paying attention. He was quiet for a moment. Do you know what I thought about when I was trapped in that car? Water rising, unable to breathe? What? Regrets. Things I'd never done, never said. People I'd never really seen. And when you appeared, cutting through that seatbelt, I thought, here is someone who sees me. Really sees me. Not the power or the money or the fear. Just me. His voice dropped to something raw, vulnerable. I don't want to waste any more time not seeing you back, Benedetta. Before I could respond, another voice interrupted in the background. Adriano, saying something urgent. Salvatore sighed. I have to go. Business. But tomorrow, if the doctors clear me, I'm coming to the villa. We need to have this conversation in person. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness, my heart racing. Tomorrow everything would change again. I was standing on the terrace the next morning when the black Mercedes pulled up the drive. My hands gripped the stone railing as I watched Salvatore emerge from the car, moving slower than usual but upright, determined. He'd exchanged the hospital gown for a dark suit, though I noticed he'd left the tie undone and the top buttons of his shirt open, a concession to the healing wound on his head, perhaps. Dimitri appeared at my elbow. He shouldn't be here. The doctors wanted him to rest another week. Can anyone stop Salvatore Ferrante when he's made up his mind? I asked. Dimitri's laugh was dry. You're learning. I met Salvatore in the villa's main room, a space of cream marble and soft light. He stopped when he saw me, his dark eyes traveling over me with an intensity that made me acutely aware of every detail. The simple green dress I'd chosen from the wardrobe that had mysteriously appeared in my room. My hair loose around my shoulders for once, the nervous way my hands twisted together. Benedetta. He crossed to me, moving carefully but steadily. You look beautiful. You look like you should be in bed, resting. I've been in bed for 3 days. I'm done resting. He gestured to the sofa. Sit with me, please. We sat, the space between us charged with everything unspoken. This close, I could smell his cologne, see the shadow of stubble on his jaw, notice how the light caught the silver in his hair. The situation with Gabriella Romano has been resolved. He began without preamble. We had a conversation. She understands now that you're under my protection and any move against you would be considered an act of war. She's backed off. Relief flooded through me. So I can go home? That depends on what you consider home. His hand found mine, warm and solid. The estate? Yes, you can return there. Your room in the servants' quarters? He shook his head. No, Benedetta. That part of your life is over. What do you mean? I mean that I'm offering you something different. A real place in my life. Not as an employee, but as... He seemed to struggle with the word. As mine. My partner. My confidant. The person I trust above all others. Salvatore, I'm a maid. I don't know how to be what you're describing. You've been doing it for 6 years without realizing it. Every time you kept a secret. Every time you showed discretion. Every time you saw me as a human being instead of a monster. You were already being exactly what I needed. His hand moved to cup my face, thumb stroking my cheek with devastating gentleness. The only difference now is that I'm asking you to do it openly, as someone I cherish, not as someone I employ. People will talk. Your associates, your family. They'll wonder what someone like me is doing with someone like you. Let them wonder. Let them talk. I spent too many years caring about appearances, about maintaining an image. And where did it get me? Alone. Surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone, because no one really knew me. His forehead touched mine, the gesture becoming familiar, intimate. Except you. You knew me, and you stayed anyway. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go, I whispered, honesty compelling me. At first, maybe. But that night in the lake, You didn't dive in because you needed the job, Benedetta. You dove in because somewhere along the way, you started to care. Admit it. Tears slid down my cheeks because he was right. Somewhere in 6 years of invisible observation, of watching him late at night when he thought no one could see, of noticing the small kindnesses beneath the ruthless exterior, I had started to care. More than was safe. More than was smart. I care, I admitted. God help me. I care about a man who's probably damned, who does terrible things, who lives in a world I barely understand. I care, and I don't know what to do about it. You accept it. You accept me, all of me, and I accept you, the woman who sees too much and says too little, who's stronger than she knows, who jumped into a lake to save a monster. His lips brushed mine, tentative, asking permission. I gave it, kissing him back with all the fear and longing and confusion tangled in my chest. His hand slid into my hair, cradling my head as the kiss deepened, and for a moment, there was no crime lord, no maid, no danger or complications. Just two people who'd spent too long not seeing each other, finally looking. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine again. Stay with me, not as an employee, as mine. I'll give you everything, safety, comfort, purpose. All I ask is that you continue being exactly who you are. And if I can't, if I'm not strong enough for your world, you dragged 200 pounds of unconscious weight through a storm-churned lake. You're stronger than you think. His smile was soft, almost tender. Besides, you won't be alone. You'll have me. And I promise you, Benedetta, I protect what's mine. I thought about my small room in the servants' quarters, my invisible life, my careful boundaries. Then I thought about his hand on my face, his voice saying my name like a prayer, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. But Salvatore, I need one promise from you. Anything. Don't make me regret trusting you. Don't make me regret believing in the man I see when you think no one's watching. Something fierce and protective flashed in his eyes. I swear it. On my life. On everything I am. I will never give you cause to regret this choice. He kissed me again, sealing the promise, and I let myself believe it. Let myself believe that a maid and a crime lord could find something real in the shadows of a dangerous world. The return to the estate felt different. I sat beside Salvatore in the back of the Mercedes, his hand holding mine, Dimitri driving with professional discretion. When we pulled up to the mansion, Adriano was waiting on the steps, his expression unreadable. So it's official then? He asked, looking between us. She's not just under your protection. She's with you. She's mine, Salvatore confirmed, no room for argument in his tone. Which means she's family. Treat her accordingly. Adriano studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Welcome to the family, Benedetta. For what it's worth, I think my brother has excellent taste. Liliana appeared next, her severe face softening when she saw our joined hands. Well? I wondered how long it would take. She turned to me. Your things have been moved to the east wing, the suite adjacent to Salvatore's rooms. I hope that's acceptable. I could only nod, overwhelmed by how quickly my life was transforming. That first week was an adjustment. I no longer cleaned rooms or pressed shirts. Other staff handled those duties now, and they looked at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. I learned to navigate family dinners where business was discussed openly, where I was expected to contribute thoughts and observations. I discovered that my years of quiet attention had given me insights that even Adriano found valuable. You notice things others miss, Salvatore explained one evening as we sat in his study. Patterns, inconsistencies, details. It's a gift, Benedetta. One I intend to use. But it wasn't all business. There were quiet mornings when we had breakfast together on the terrace, evenings when he taught me about wine and art and the complicated politics of his world, nights when he held me close and whispered confessions about his fears and regrets, trusting me with vulnerabilities he'd never shown anyone else. 2 months after the night in the lake, Salvatore called me to his study. I found him standing by the window, looking out at the grounds with that expression of solitary contemplation I'd observed so many times from the shadows. "I have a proposition for you," he said without turning. "A way for you to use your gifts for something good." "I'm listening." He turned then, his expression serious. "My legitimate businesses, the real ones, not the fronts, they generate substantial profit. I've been thinking about establishing a foundation. Something to help women in vulnerable situations. Domestic violence victims, single mothers, women escaping dangerous circumstances. They need resources, safe housing, job training, legal assistance." "That's a wonderful idea," I said slowly. "But why are you telling me?" "Because I want you to run it." He crossed to me, taking my hands in his. "You understand vulnerability, Benedetta. You've lived it. You know what it's like to be invisible, to be powerless, to be afraid. That perspective is invaluable. And your discretion, your intelligence, your compassion. You're exactly the person who should be doing this work." The idea took root immediately, blooming into possibilities. "I don't have any formal training in social work or nonprofit management. You'll learn. I'll hire the best people to support you. But you'll be the heart of it, the vision." His smile was proud. "You'll help people the way no one helped you when your father died and your mother couldn't work. You'll be the safety net you wish had existed." Tears pricked my eyes. "You'd trust me with something like that?" "I trust you with my life. A foundation is easy by comparison." That night, as we lay in his bed, our bed now, I traced the scar above his eyebrow, the mark from the accident that had changed everything. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, eyes closed. "That I almost lost you before I ever really had you. If I'd been a minute later to the lake, if the current had been stronger. But you weren't. And it wasn't." His eyes opened, dark and serious. "You saved me, Benedetta. Not just from drowning. You saved me from a life where I was surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone, where no one saw the man beneath the reputation." "I see you," I whispered. "I've always seen you." "I know. That's why I love you." The words hung in the air, precious and terrifying. He'd never said them before, though I'd felt them in every touch, every look, every vulnerability shared. "I love you too," I said, the truth of it settling into my bones. "Even though you're dangerous and complicated and live in a world I'm still learning to navigate, I love you." His kiss was answer and promise, and I let myself believe that we could build something beautiful from our impossible beginning. A maid and a crime lord, seeing each other clearly at last. The foundation became my purpose. Salvatore purchased a building in the city, a graceful old structure that had once been a convent, with high ceilings and rooms that could be converted into safe apartments. I threw myself into the work, learning everything I could about nonprofit management, trauma-informed care, and the complex needs of women escaping dangerous situations. Liliana became an unexpected ally. "I wasn't always a housekeeper," she confided one afternoon as we reviewed architectural plans. "When I was young, I ran from a violent husband. I had nowhere to go, no resources. If something like your foundation had existed then." She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. 6 months after Salvatore's proposal, we opened our doors. The first resident was a woman named Teresa, 24 years old with a black eye and 2 small children. She stood in the reception area, clutching her children's hands, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "You're safe here," I told her, and meant it, because Salvatore had ensured that the building had security that rivaled military installations, that every woman who came through our doors was protected by the full weight of the Ferrante name. His reputation, the fear it inspired, became a shield for the vulnerable. "You're using your darkness to protect the light," I told him one night. "Do you see the irony?" "I see the justice," he replied. "I've done terrible things, Benedetta. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But if I can use the power I've built through those terrible things to protect people who need it, maybe that's a start at balance." But our happiness was fragile, built on a foundation that could crack at any moment. The reminder came on a cold November evening, almost a year after the accident that had brought us together. I was working late at the foundation, reviewing applications for our job training program, when Dimitri burst into my office, his expression grim. "We need to leave. Now." "What's happened?" "Gabriella Romano. She's made a move against one of our warehouses. There are casualties. Salvatore wants you somewhere secure until we know the full scope of the situation." Fear iced through me. Is he safe? For now. "But Benedetta, Romano's people have been asking about you again, about the foundation. They know this is important to you, which makes it a target. The idea that my work, my attempt to do something good, could endanger the women we helped made me sick. The residents here, already being evacuated to secure locations. Salvatore planned for this contingency. He's planned for every contingency involving you. The safe house this time was an apartment in the city. High floor, excellent sightlines, security at every entrance. I paced the living room while Dimitri made calls, getting updates, until finally Salvatore himself walked through the door. I flew to him, my hands running over his chest, his arms, checking for injuries. "You're okay. You're okay." "I'm fine." He caught my hands, stilling them. "But Benedetta, we need to talk about Romano. She's escalating. This attack tonight, it was designed to draw me out, to make me reactive. She's looking for weaknesses. And I'm a weakness. No." His voice was fierce. "You're my strength." But she doesn't understand the difference. She sees someone I care about and thinks that makes you leverage. He cupped my face, his expression tortured. "I won't let her hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt you. But that means making a choice I've been avoiding." "What choice?" "Whether to eliminate the threat permanently." His jaw tightened. "Gabriella Romano has been a thorn in my side for years, but we've maintained a careful balance. Neither of us strong enough to destroy the other without devastating losses. But now she's threatening you. And I find I'm willing to risk those devastating losses if it means keeping you safe." The implication was clear. He was talking about war. Real war, with casualties and consequences that would ripple through the entire criminal underworld. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't start a war over me." "Why not? You're worth it. Because people will die, Salvatore. On both sides. And I can't be responsible for that." Tears slid down my cheeks. I jumped into that lake to save a life, not to cause more death. He pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me tightly. "Then what do you suggest? Because doing nothing isn't an option. Romano won't stop until she's either neutralized you as a vulnerability or used you to destroy me." I thought about Teresa and the other women at the foundation. Thought about the life I'd built from invisible Maid to someone who mattered. Thought about the man holding me who'd given me purpose and love in equal measure. "What if we make it so I'm not a vulnerability?" I said slowly. "What if we show Romano that threatening me doesn't weaken you, it strengthens your position?" "I'm listening. The foundation. It's legitimate, completely legal. and it's saving lives. Make that more public. Attach your family name to it officially. Show that the Ferrantes aren't just crime lords. You're also philanthropists, community supporters. Make me visible in that world, respected in that world. Romano can threaten a secret girlfriend. It's much harder to threaten a public figure doing charitable work. Salvatore pulled back, looking at me with something like awe. You want to use legitimacy as armor. Why not? You've always said the best protection is making yourself too costly to attack. Make the foundation, make me too costly. If Romano moves against a charity helping vulnerable women, she loses face with everyone. Even criminals have lines they don't cross publicly. A slow smile spread across his face. You're brilliant. You know that. I'm a woman who's spent years watching how your world works. I'm just applying the lessons. The plan took 3 months to implement. Salvatore's lawyers created a formal charitable trust, attached the Ferrante family name to it prominently, and arranged for media coverage of our work. I gave interviews to local papers, appeared at community events, became a visible advocate for the women we served. It was strange, being seen after so many years of invisibility. But I discovered I had a talent for it, for telling stories that moved people, for asking for support in ways that opened wallets and hearts, for making the abstract concept of vulnerable women into real people with names and faces and futures worth protecting. Gabriella Romano sent a message through intermediaries. She was backing off. Attacking the foundation would be bad for business, bad for her image. The truce was uneasy, but real. You did it, Salvatore said one evening as we reviewed the foundation's quarterly report. You neutralized a threat without firing a shot. I just made myself too expensive to kill, I replied. That's different than neutralizing the threat. Is it? He set aside the report, pulling me into his lap. You've taken everything I am, the power, the reputation, the resources built on darkness, and used it to create light. That's more than neutralizing a threat, Benedetta. That's alchemy. 2 years after the accident that changed everything, the foundation had helped over 300 women and their children. We'd expanded to include job training programs, legal aid, and counseling services. The old convent building was now a thriving community center, always full of activity and hope. I stood in the main hall one afternoon, watching Teresa, our first resident, teach a computer skills class. She'd gotten her degree, started a career, rebuilt her life. Her children were thriving. She was proof that escape was possible, that new beginnings weren't just fantasies. It's something, isn't it? Adriano's voice came from beside me. He'd become a regular presence at the foundation, helping with security and logistics. What you've built here. What we've built, I corrected. This wouldn't exist without Salvatore's support. It wouldn't exist without you seeing the possibility. He was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? When you first saved Salvatore's life, I thought it was just instinct. Decent person sees someone drowning, tries to help. But watching you since then, I've realized it was more than that. You didn't just save his life that night. You saved him from the life he was living, alone, isolated, seeing everyone as either an asset or a threat. He saved me too, I said softly, from invisibility, from believing I didn't matter. You both saved each other. That's how the best loves work. That evening, Salvatore took me to dinner at an elegant restaurant in the city. It was the same place we'd had our first official date as a couple, back when I was still adjusting to being seen, to being his. You're nervous, I observed, noticing how he kept checking his watch. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything is very, very right. But I need to... He stopped, took a breath, then reached across the table to take my hand. Benedetta, 3 years ago, you pulled me from a sinking car. You saved my life. But more than that, you saw me. really saw me, all of me, and chose to stay anyway. Salvatore, let me finish. Please. His thumb stroked across my knuckles. I've spent my entire life building power, building an empire, thinking that was what mattered. But you taught me that power without love is just emptiness. You taught me that being seen, really seen, by one person who knows all your darkness and loves you anyway is worth more than controlling an entire city. He stood, coming around to my side of the table, and my breath caught as he lowered himself to one knee. The restaurant went quiet around us, but I barely noticed. All I could see was Salvatore, this powerful, dangerous man, making himself vulnerable in the most public way possible. Benedetta, you are my salvation, my better self, my conscience and my heart. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the woman who jumped into a lake to save a monster? The ring was beautiful, a sapphire the color of the lake where I'd found him, surrounded by diamonds that caught the light. But it was his eyes I focused on, seeing the hope and fear and love tangled there. You're not a monster, I whispered. You're a man who does monstrous things sometimes, but who also creates foundations and protects the vulnerable and loves with everything he has. And yes, Salvatore, yes, I'll marry you. His smile was incandescent as he slipped the ring onto my finger, then stood and pulled me into a kiss that made the restaurant erupt in applause. But I barely heard it. All that mattered was this moment, this man, this impossible love that had grown from the seeds of a single act of courage. Always you, he murmured against my lips. From that moment in the lake, it was always you. The words sent a shock through me. What did you say? Always you. He pulled back slightly, his brow furrowing. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything is... I couldn't finish, overwhelmed by emotion. Because those 3 words crystallized everything, every moment of seeing and being seen, every choice to stay, every leap of faith. It had always been leading here, to this moment, to us. Always you too, I whispered back. Even when I didn't know it, it was always you. The wedding was planned for spring, 3 years and 2 months after the night I'd pulled Salvatore from the lake. We kept it relatively small. Family, close associates, and the women from the foundation who had become like sisters to me. The ceremony would take place at the estate, in the gardens overlooking the lake, where everything had changed. But first, there was one more obstacle to overcome. Marcello Esposito, Salvatore's longtime lawyer and advisor, requested a private meeting with me 2 weeks before the wedding. We met in Salvatore's study, the same room where I'd dusted bookshelves for 6 years, invisible and careful. Benedetta, I need to discuss something delicate with you, Marcello began, his weathered face serious. Something that Salvatore doesn't want to acknowledge, but that I feel you deserve to know. I'm listening. When you marry Salvatore, you become a Ferrante in every sense. That means protection, but it also means risk. His enemies will see you as a legitimate target. The foundation already makes you visible, but as his wife, that visibility increases exponentially. He paused. I need to know if you understand what you're signing up for. Because once you're married, there's no going back to invisible. There's no safe way out. I thought about my answer carefully. Marcello, I pulled a 200-pound man from a sinking car in the middle of a storm. I've spent 3 years building a life in a world I barely understood when I started. I've faced down threats from Gabriella Romano and others. I think I understand the risks. Do you? His eyes were sharp. Do you understand that your children, Salvatore's heirs, will be born into this life? That they'll never have a choice about whether to be Ferrantes? The mention of children made my hand drift unconsciously to my stomach, where a secret I hadn't yet told Salvatore was growing. I was 8 weeks pregnant, discovered just 3 days ago. I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell him. "I understand," I said firmly, "and I choose it anyway. Because the alternative is a life without him, and I've lived enough years invisible and alone. I'd rather face danger with Salvatore than safety without him." Marcello studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're stronger than you look, Benedetta. Salvatore chose well." After he left, I sat in the study, one hand on my still flat stomach, thinking about the future. A child, Salvatore's child, an heir to both his legitimate empire and his darker legacy. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a fierce protectiveness rise up. This child would be born into privilege and danger in equal measure, but they would also be born into love, into a family that had fought to be together, that had chosen each other against all odds, that had to count for something. Salvatore found me there an hour later, still sitting in contemplation. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, settling into the chair beside mine. "I have something to tell you." I took his hand, placing it over my stomach. "Something that changes our timeline slightly." His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You're pregnant. 8 weeks. I found out 3 days ago." I searched his face anxiously. "I know we hadn't planned this yet, that we were going to wait until after the wedding." His kiss silenced my worried rambling. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "A baby. We're having a baby. You're not upset?" "Upset?" He laughed, the sound full of wonder. "Benedetta, you've given me everything. Love, purpose, a reason to be better than I was. And now a child? How could I be anything but grateful?" His hand splayed across my stomach, reverent and protective. "Our daughter will be extraordinary. She'll have your courage and your compassion, and I'll spend every day making sure she knows she's loved and valued and seen. How do you know it's a girl? Because you're extraordinary, and you'd create someone equally extraordinary. A daughter seemed inevitable." His smile was soft. "Though I suppose I'll love our son just as much if I'm wrong." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the spring air full of cherry blossoms and promise. I stood in my room, the room that had once been in the servants' quarters, but was now the bride's suite, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was almost unrecognizable from the invisible maid who'd scrubbed floors and kept secrets. My dress was simple but elegant, cream silk that flowed over my body and the small swell of my pregnancy. My hair was loose in waves down my back, and my only jewelry was the sapphire engagement ring and a locket containing a photo of my parents. Liliana appeared in the doorway, elegant in a dove-gray dress. "It's time, child." "Liliana?" I turned to her, suddenly emotional. "Thank you for everything you taught me, for helping me survive those first years. You survived because you were smart enough to learn and strong enough to endure." She came forward, adjusting my veil with practiced hands. "I'm proud of you, Benedetta. Your mother would be too." The gardens had been transformed into something magical. White chairs faced an arbor twined with flowers, and beyond it, the lake sparkled in the afternoon sun. The same lake that had nearly claimed Salvatore, that had brought us together. I walked down the aisle on Adriano's arm. He'd insisted on giving me away, since my father couldn't be there. At the end of the aisle stood Salvatore, magnificent in a dark suit, his eyes fixed on me with such intensity that the rest of the world fell away. The ceremony itself was a blur. I remember the priest's words, remember sliding a ring onto Salvatore's finger and feeling him do the same to mine. Remember his voice, steady and sure, as he promised to love and protect me all the days of his life. But the moment that stayed with me, that crystallized into perfect clarity, came after we were pronounced husband and wife. Salvatore pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine in that gesture that had become ours, and whispered 3 words that weren't part of the traditional vows. "Always been you." The same words from the restaurant, but now they carried the weight of everything we'd built together. 3 years of seeing and being seen, of choosing each other despite the complications, of building something beautiful from the wreckage of a sinking car and a storm-dark lake. Always been you too, I whispered back, and kissed my husband as applause erupted around us. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom. Teresa gave a speech about the foundation, about how the work we did was changing lives. Adriano toasted us with champagne, his words surprisingly moving as he talked about the brother he'd gotten back when I'd pulled him from the lake. But the moment I treasured most came late in the evening, when Salvatore and I slipped away to the terrace overlooking the lake. The party continued inside, but we needed a moment of quiet, just us. "What are you thinking?" I asked, leaning against his side, his arm warm around my shoulders. That 3 years ago, I drove off a cliff, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it brought me you. His hand moved to rest on my stomach. Brought us this, a family I never thought I'd have. You know what's funny? I looked up at him, seeing the man beneath the reputation, the human behind the monster. For 6 years, I thought I was invisible in your house, but I was wrong. You saw me even then. You were watching, testing, trying to understand who I was. We've been seeing each other all along. We just didn't know it yet. Benedetta Ferrante. He tested my new name, smiling. It suits you. Better than Benedetta the Invisible Maid? You were never invisible. Not really. You were just waiting for the right moment to be seen. He kissed the top of my head, and I was waiting for someone worth seeing clearly, someone who'd see me back. Below us, the lake reflected the lights from the party, turning the water into liquid gold. The same water that had nearly claimed him, that had tested my courage, that had transformed both our lives. It looked peaceful now, beautiful, concealing the darkness beneath with a surface that sparkled and danced. Like us, I thought. Like our life together. Beautiful on the surface, with depths and dangers underneath that only we fully understood. But we'd chosen it. Chosen each other, with open eyes and full hearts. Do you ever regret it? Salvatore asked quietly. Jumping into that lake? Everything that came after? I thought about the question seriously, thought about the danger and the complications, the way my life had been upended, the loss of invisibility and safety. Then I thought about the foundation and the lives we'd saved. About the man beside me who loved me fiercely, about the child growing inside me. No, I said firmly, not for a second. Because that night in the lake, I didn't just save your life, Salvatore. I saved my own. I just didn't know it yet. He turned me in his arms, his hands cradling my face with infinite gentleness. Always been you, he said again. The 3 words that had become our truth, our promise, our foundation. Always been you, I echoed, and sealed it with a kiss. 3 months later, I stood in the foundation's main hall, my pregnancy now visible, cutting the ribbon on our newest expansion, a job training center that would help hundreds of women gain skills and independence. The cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and I answered them with the confidence of someone who'd learned that being seen wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. That evening, I returned home, to our home, the estate that was no longer a prison of invisibility, but a sanctuary built on love and choice. Salvatore met me at the door, his hand immediately going to my rounded stomach to feel the baby kick. "She's active today," he observed. "She's celebrating." We opened the training center. Our daughter, the activist. His smile was proud. She'll probably organize the other babies in the nursery, demand better working conditions. I laughed, leading him toward the study. "I have the donor reports you wanted to review. Later." He pulled me close, his lips finding that spot below my ear that made me shiver. Right now, I want to celebrate with my extraordinary wife who's changing the world one woman at a time. Is that what I'm doing? That's exactly what you're doing. And you know what the best part is? What? You're doing it by being exactly who you've always been. The woman who sees what needs to be done and does it. Who protects the vulnerable. Who makes the hard choices. The woman who jumped into a lake to save a monster and somehow made him want to be a man instead. You were always a man, Salvatore. You just needed someone to see you clearly. And you needed someone to see you back. His hand traced patterns on my stomach, gentle and reverent. We saved each other, Benedetta. That night in the lake, we saved each other. Later, as we lay in bed, his hand still resting on my stomach, feeling our daughter move, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From invisible maid to the wife of Salvatore Ferrante, from silent observer to active participant in a dangerous world, from loneliness to love. What are you thinking about? He murmured, half asleep. That 3 words can change everything. Which 3 words? I smiled in the darkness, remembering that moment in the hospital, his hand on my face, the first time he'd really seen me. And later, at the restaurant, when he'd proposed. And again at our wedding, when he'd made it our promise. Always been you, I whispered. His arm tightened around me, pulling me closer. Always been you, he echoed. And in those 3 words was everything. Every choice we'd made, every risk we'd taken, every moment of seeing and being seen. The next morning, I stood at the window of our bedroom, watching the sun rise over the lake. Salvatore came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my growing middle, and together we watched the light transform the water from dark mystery to brilliant promise. Ready for another day? He asked. With you? Always. And as we stood there, the man who'd been pulled from darkness and the woman who'd done the pulling, I realized that love wasn't about being saved. It was about choosing to save each other, again and again, every single day. It was about seeing someone completely, the good and the terrible, the light and the shadow, and loving them anyway. It was about 3 words that became a promise, a truth, and a future. Always been you. And always, always would be.